I'm Dan Szwaj, Director at Turner. I've been involved with the design and delivery of Blackwattle Apartments since 2016, with a completion in 2020. The project is an 8-storey mixed-use building with residential apartments to the upper 7 floors, consisting of a total of 99 apartments. On the ground floor there are 4 retail tenancies that face both Bay Street and Wentworth Street. It's the first time that we'll work with City West Housing. They've delivered a number of projects across the Sydney area, and for me, seeing the projects they've delivered in the past was testament to their conviction in terms of getting a good architectural outcome, and also I see that adding value to the residents in terms of making sure that there is design excellence and that the level of amenity that they provide is exceptional. The precinct itself is quite interesting because it is a mixed tenure. It has affordable, which is Blackwattle Apartments. It has market housing, another project that we did complete next door, being one of those, but also has social housing and social seniors. So that, I suppose, more contemporary model of a mixed tenure precinct was interesting to work in, and that was part of the City of Sydney's master plan for that site. But also the idea to have blind tenure so that there's no distinguishing architectural approach in terms of quality, I would say quality being an important part, or the way that the apartments are designed that distinguishes them apart.
My name is Lisa Sorrentino. I'm Head of Development at City West Housing. We are responsible for delivering and operating affordable housing within the inner city area. At the moment, City West Housing operates and manages 18 buildings, which makes up just under 1,000 apartments in the City of Sydney LGA. We select our sites based on proximity to amenities, importantly public transport, but also we look at other things such as local schools, fresh food and medical services. Each of our projects is unique within our portfolio. They generally just respond to our demand that we see, and that demand is diverse, that demand is reflective of society. There isn't a general cohort. We don't have a specific specialized product that we provide. We just provide a general housing product. Demand in 2020 has accelerated significantly. At the beginning of the year pre-COVID, we had about 350 eligible applicants on our wait list, which is an unadvertised wait list. We completed about 174 apartments during COVID, and our wait list is now at over 450. So we have seen an extraordinary amount of people's situations changing with COVID. Our own residents have had a loss of income, as well as we see a number of people that are in housing stress and require housing. We are seeing some trends for single occupant households increasing, so demand for our 1-bedrooms is the most severe. We do also see a lot of families that require housing, particularly a lot of single mums, as well as the single occupants. We're seeing a lot of older people that need housing because they don't have secure housing, and a lot of them have been priced out of the market and are now couch surfing.
The site's located in an interesting part of inner Sydney. It's really about its location or proximity to 2 suburbs, one being Glebe, which is traditionally terraces, really fine grain streets and houses, a lot of filigree in terms of the way that the terraces have been designed, and also the high street in terms of the traditional shop fronts. Ultimo, on the other hand, has more robust forms. It's got the really large warehouses. Both suburbs have bricks in terms of the main material. Whilst warehouses use it in a different way, I think there's a really beautiful architecture or approach to those 19th century buildings. And I think that character and how we look at the site itself being, I suppose, the nexus between those 2 suburbs was really an inspiration in terms of how we can get the language of a contemporary apartment building to respond to its context, its fine grained nature of Glebe and the robust warehouse forms of Ultimo.
For Blackwattle Apartments, City West Housing procured the architects through a tender process. So we had gone out to 4 architects and effectively did a little mini design competition asking for architects to come up with a concept for their vision for the site, and we evaluated those concepts and proposals, looking at one that the building design did demonstrate, it was like any other apartment building, and it didn't have a stigma attached to it, and also that it was, but at the same time, that it was designed fit for purpose for affordable housing, and that the design was long lasting and it wasn't trendy and it was low maintenance to reduce our ongoing operating costs. Working with Turners has been fantastic. Like any relationship, there's trying times. Probably when the client wanted to value engineer items. However, Turner has treated this very passionately. Dan and his team have been, in there every step of the way, always going out at the critical points, making sure that their vision has been translated with the builder. Dan's team was quite critical in making sure that we got that good design and that outcome. It wasn't just on paper, that we actually translated to the bricks and mortar.
Turner have a really strong interest in housing diversity and looking at living topologies and how we can improve on that. And so when we're approached to participate in the competition or the design ideas, we really saw that as an opportunity to take on board our knowledge and to, in some ways, give that back to the community in terms of a commitment to the project. We went further than we would normally do on a normal project, just in terms of understanding the opportunities that it would offer the future tenants. By our participation in the project, we could lift up the quality of the building to give that delight. So when people arrive home, that they do have a fantastic place to live in. The way that we approached the idea of communal space in the building was, one, to set up the apartments in smaller foyer or groups. So there's normally no more than 4 or 5 apartments off a typical common corridor. Whilst there's 99 apartments in the development, we broke that up into 3 foyers, so almost creating 3 micro communities. So we really wanted to make sure that the residents were quite familiar with the neighbours and that there was that connection. In terms of the communal space, we set up 2 spaces. One which was more a passive space, that's the level 1 courtyard. It's south-facing. It doesn't get a lot of sunlight, but we see that as a really important space, and it's almost like the back door or the back entry to the building. There's obviously the front door from Wentworth Street, which is a little bit quieter than Bay Street, but this idea of having a back door landscape area where it was an outlook space that separated our building from the adjacent one was really important. But then a more active space is on the rooftop. It's placed between, in terms of the master plan, it's placed between the 2 market housing buildings by Crofie in the foreground, and has views across to Wentworth Park. And the way we looked at that was a space that all the residents could come in. It works really hard. It's a small space. It's a small site. The building's only 18 metres deep. So what we looked at there was taking advantage of the idea of more dramatic spaces and extending the communal space outside of the building envelope and borrowing some space from the City of Sydney and having that cantilevered deck. And so from that you get a fantastic view across to the city as well as Wentworth Park. Bay Street and Wentworth Street are quite different, and Bay Street we approached as more as a bald-faced facade, similar to the warehouse topology and uses on the other side of Bay Street. It incorporates that ground level retail shopfront, and that's looking at the idea of the bay window, the glazed bricks, kind of responding to the more high street, the Glebe High Street, in terms of its fenestration. Wentworth Street we've looked at as the residential foyer entry. There's the 3 different foyers. Taking some of our earlier projects and understanding how to use the material further, one of those being Silkwood in Surrey Hills, the idea of using off-form concrete and having the large format numbers embossed into the concrete. We've taken that approach throughout the history of the projects and used that on the Wentworth Street addresses. That address also incorporates the colonnade to provide that weather protection and to give that difference to that street so that there is a different language through there. And so whilst there's a familial approach to the language of the building, the way we use concrete, the way we use the brickwork is quite different in the 2 facades. The project uses a limited palette of materials. We use concrete, we use brickwork and metal cladding. So for us, given our history of trying to work with less but get more out of it, we've really used the brickwork pushing that detailing. So we've used brickwork both to establish the building mass but also to use it as a screen element. So this comes through in terms of how we approach the balconies and having the hidden miss brickwork, but also how we start to detail the brickwork in terms of the finer detail, and that carries through from our understanding of Glebe and the way the brickwork's used there. The way we looked at the balconies was to introduce a personalised colour to each one. And whilst it's quite subtle, you do pick up on that when you start to look at the building. Even now, that's been further enhanced by people how they've appropriated the balcony space. So there's a lot of planting that's been introduced there. In some instances, people have introduced their own flags or artwork. The ability for people to have their own identity within an apartment building and to be able to express that as part of their balconies, I think is great. And sometimes as architects, we just need to relax about those type of things. I think there was a real risk for us that we could spend money unwisely in areas that didn't add benefit to the residents. So we really focused on that idea of uneven spending. So for instance, we look at wayfinding and the environmental graphics as part of our office and the designs to be integral. But rather than having it as an expensive element, we actually looked at it being stencil applied, which was cheaper. So we used that stencil approach, which really tied back to the warehouse concept. And so we saw that as being important. The way we approached the common floors was just to polish back the concrete. And then to look at line marking to signify the levels, but also to use them as the idea of the entry mat to lift cores. At street level, for instance, we used brass on the more tactile materials. Doing our research and looking into the materials and costs, we actually found that some of these items were cheaper than using the more conventional stainless steel. So that really tied well into our approach of using natural materials.
City West Housing determines the bedroom need based on the number of occupants. So we look at the number of adults that will be living in the apartment as well as the number of kids, and then we further look at the age and gender of the kids to determine what kind of bedrooms they need. So generally our one bedrooms are occupied by either single occupants or couples. Our two bedrooms are occupied by parents or single parents with kids. Sometimes our two bedrooms though are also for people who may require a live-in carer, so they're entitled to a second bedroom, and our three bedrooms are predominantly for families. Blackwattle has a higher percentage of one bedrooms than is allowable under the DCP, and that was a very specific planning strategy and request made to the city to vary the DCPs because of our demand, and because of that demand argument, they have allowed us to exceed the maximum number of one bedrooms.
The apartment sizes are typically 50 square metres for a one bed, 70 square metres for a two bed, and 90 square metres for a three bed. It's rare that it does vary, and it probably only varies when we start looking at apartments that need to be adaptable to accommodate future mobility needs for residents. But within that, it's probably maximising how we use that space. So the way we looked at the interiors is to look at the kitchen and bathroom designs and bedroom design in terms of incorporating joinery that enables the residents to personalise the space. So really small things like making sure that we introduce storage cupboards at entry points, looking at the ability just to put hooks on the walls and as part of the design, and then for us as architects to look at that composition and to celebrate it, and also to maximise joinery. So we put the fridge joinery or the part of the kitchen joinery facing or the back to the entry, so we can actually align that. Other things that we looked at were having open shelves in the kitchen, but also the bedroom, so that you move away from that ubiquitous sliding glass doors that becomes the kind of default market housing or apartment living. But you have these open shelves that allow the residents to start to personalise that space and be able to express their own individuality in that. So sure, you can hang pictures on the walls, but most of the time these things are quite limited. And actually having the opportunity to go back in the space to see how each resident have used these spaces has been really rewarding.